Aledort, and in this edition of In Deep With, we'll be looking at the guitar playing of the late, great Gary Moore, certainly one of the greatest rock guitar players we have ever known. Very tragically, Gary passed away this past February 6, 2011. Gary was born April 4th, 1952 in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Started to play at a young age, and one of his big heroes was Eric Clapton and his playing in the Blues Breakers and Cream. And at 16, he became a close friend of Peter Green, British guitarist who had also played in John Mayall's Blues Breakers right around the time Peter was forming Fleetwood Mac, one of the most essential British blues rock bands ever. And they became such close friends that Peter Green ended up giving Gary his beloved 1959 Les Paul Standard. And years later, Gary would, in tribute to Peter Green, record a fantastic album, Blues for Greenie, which came out in 1995. Gary Moore, in his early years, played in a band called Coliseum 2, which was sort of like a jazz fusion band, and then went on to play in a band called Skid Row, not related to the modern metal band, with whom he recorded 3 albums. And then in the early 70s, became friends with Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy, and played in Thin Lizzy, and went back to Thin Lizzy a little bit later in 1978. And in 79, he joined up with Phil Lynott to write a song, one of Gary's most famous and beloved songs, called Parisian Walkways, which came out on Gary's 1979 album, Back to the Streets. Gary's most famous record probably is a record he released in 1990 called Still Got the Blues, a fantastic album, his tribute to the blues. On that record, he had cameo appearances from blues greats B.B. King, Albert King, and Albert Collins. And he recorded a song on that record, one of his best-known songs, similar to Parisian Walkways, called Still Got the Blues. So in this lesson, we're going to go over some of Gary's techniques, his sound, his touch, and sort of the building blocks of his style. All right, let's talk a little bit about Gary's signature tone. He had a very distinctive sound, and even though he was well known for playing a Fiesta Red Strat, which I think was a 60 or 61, beautiful guitar, and he got a great tone on it, I think his sound is more closely associated with that of a Les Paul, as he would oftentimes go from a very warm sound of the neck pickup for melodies and a very vocal sound, and then just kick down to the bridge pickup for more intensity for his solos. So he usually ran a certain amount of gain, and he was known for having a lot of sustain. Notes would just stay there. And he had a really terrific vibrato. So as I said, he would go from a tone like that to, when he played leads, he would increase the gain, and on the bridge pickup, so when you listen to Gary's recordings, listen closely for that. The sound of the guitar, the tone, and then the vibrato. He just had a great, very even, very vocal vibrato that he would use. So it's an important element in his sound. All right, now let's get to some of his licks, how to incorporate Gary Moore style licks into your playing. As I said, Gary was very influenced by the guitar playing of Eric Clapton and Peter Green. And they're playing in the days of the Blues Breakers and Clapton, Cream, and Peter Green and Fleetwood Mac. It's based on a lot of minor pentatonic and blues scale stuff. So Gary oftentimes would base his licks around a very typical scale and position. I'll show it to you right now. A minor pentatonic in 5th position. The fingering I used was index pinky for the low E string, but then index ring for everything else. Gary liked to use his middle finger, almost like Django Reinhardt, and would go in between his index and his middle finger. So on the top two strings, he'd use ring index, but then he'd switch to middle. And sometimes he would even go index middle on the top two strings. Say he was playing a lick like this. So as you can see, I'm using a wide stretch between the index and middle finger for this lick. The middle finger's 3 frets higher, 8th fret of the B string, to do that little half step bend, while the index finger's barred across the top two. And then I continue to use that finger for the all that. And then I'll switch to the ring finger. Most guitar players, if they played a classic descending triplet run in A minor pentatonic like this, Gary would play that lick and get over to the index and middle quickly. If you were to play the same lick ascending, we start with the pinky, then switch to the middle, back to the ring, Alright, a staple of blues rock soloing in A minor pentatonic is to play triplets on the top two strings with a pull-off. But a cool thing to do is start with a hammer pull like that, or with the ring. So a way to utilize that idea in more of a standard Gary Moore type of lick is to start with the quick hammer pull and then end with, so the shape is, and then move that over again. When you put that all together, you get this. Alright, we can take this lick and change it slightly to make a different lick. Instead of going and then the pull off, we're just going to go and then move that over. And that would sound like this. And if you were to play a similar lick on the way up, it would sound like this. So that was so I kind of tried to work in those on each string. And then here I switched to the Gary fingering. Alright, here's another variation. And in this one, that was the shape that got moved across all the strings. So you just try to get those ornamental fast hammer pulls in there. With big bends and big vibratos. That's a major element in Gary's style. Alright, here's one more variation. We're going to make the lick a little shorter. That's the whole thing, a hammer pull. And then you move that and that's going to sound like this. And for the last variation, we're going to do what I call the two-pick version, which Clapton was known for. So instead of going, you start with two picks. So you get that. And then you take that idea and you move it over like that. And then you end up with this. Alright, so be sure to take these ideas and licks and move them to different keys and different positions of the fretboard. Like, for example, you want to move these ideas in similar shapes up to C and play them up there, up to D, to E, down to G, because they're going to feel different, especially using that wider stretch. When you go down to the lower positions, it's going to be even wider, of course. But whether you choose to use Gary's fingerings or not, these types of licks, you need to practice them all over the fretboard. So if you were going to do a lick like this in C, you could play something like this. Up in the key of D. The cool thing about all of these licks is Gary would apply these sort of fast cascading runs to all different kinds of grooves, anything from medium tempo, straight 4/4, to a slow blues, to a fast shuffle, because they work anywhere. Riffs like these just sort of float over the top, and when you put a phrasing together in a guitar solo, it's very effective to go from vocal type phrases that are simple with a good touch and vibrato, and then these fast flurries and runs that kind of skip over the beat. So I'm going to give you an example of that right now, again played in A, of how Gary might go back and forth from simpler traditional blues style phrasing like B.B. King, Albert King, or Albert Collins, three of his big influences, and then this sort of faster, flashier style that he was known for. We're in the key of A, and the solo is based on A minor pentatonic, and I start with A minor pentatonic licks up in 17th position. I begin with the 20th fret bend of G up to A, and then hold the bend in vibrato. And I come down. So staccato, 20, 17, 19, and then I hold these two fingers in place and do a hammer pull between 17 and 20 on the B string, played against that 19th fret of the G string. So together, and then, so it's just a descending lick. So 17th pull off 1917. Then the same thing over one string. 17, pull off 1917. One more time. And then I get down to A minor pentatonic in 5th position. One more time. So here I'm doing this bend, a little bigger than a whole step. So it's very Albert King-like. So after rolling back and forth at the 5th fret on the B and the high E, 8th fret of the B, and then pre-bent. And then I went into one of those licks that I was talking about with a lot of fast hammers and pulls. So just one more time. So then from the 5 chord, back to these more melodic Albert King type phrases. You can see I'm using index and middle like Gary would do. So that's 10th fret, bend up a whole step, move back to 9th fret, bend a half step, and I'm finger picking to get that Albert King snap sound. And I try to put a real big vibrato, and then back to the same kind of fast, and I did so I incorporated the open A and low E string. Slide down and pull off, and then pull off on the low E, and ended with a big vibrato. Alright, as I mentioned earlier, one of Gary Moore's most beloved compositions is Parisian Walkways, which he did with Phil Lynott of Thin Lizzy. And that chord progression is a very standard cycle of fourths chord progression that can be found in a variety of different popular songs and in classical music as well. And in fact, there's a Thin Lizzy song called Still in Love with You that has a very similar chord progression. And Gary revisited that type of chord progression, cycle of fourths, when he did the title track, Still Got the Blues. So right now I'm going to play an example in that style of Still Got the Blues, and then we'll go over it. Okay, this example is in the key of A minor, but I'm going to start on the 4 chord, D minor 7, and then it's going to go to G, to C, major 7, to F major 7. And that's known as a cycle of fourths because the intervallic relationship between all those root notes, D, G, C, F, that's all fourths. And it stays diatonic within A natural minor or the A Aeolian mode. And the nice thing about it is when it resolves back to the 1 chord, A minor. So the time signature is 6/8, and we have a chord for each bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, D minor, G, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, C major 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, F major 7, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, B minor 7 flat 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, E7 sharp 9, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, A minor, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like that. So when soloing, Gary likes to make close reference to the chord changes so that his melodic lines have strength and have a direct reference to those chords. So over D minor, you can hear him play things like the way I opened up this solo. So that's just starting with the D minor chord tones, the 5th A, the root note D, and the minor 3rd F. But I played it in a melodic fashion. So after fretting this F note, I bend from 1 fret below in vibrato to give it that vocal quality. So right there, So the melody comes down. So right here, I'm on the major third of the next chord, which is G. So what happens is on both those chords, D minor 7 and G, straight G, I'm accentuating the minor third of the chord. F over D, B over G, and then I do the same thing again, because this is over C. So it's again the chord tones. The fifth of C is G, the root is C, the major third is E. And that's a nice technique there where I bend up a whole step from D to E. And while the string is bent, I'm going to fret it. And then I come down to A, the major third of the next chord, F. So if we just look at the target notes of the melody, over D minor we have the minor third F, and then over G the major third, B over G, and then C major 7 we have E, the major third over C, and then F major 7 we have A, the major third over F. And then over B minor 7 flat 5, same deal, I'm using a D note, that's the minor third, and I use that same technique again. A note is bent, and I fret it while it's bent and unfret it. And then over the E 7 sharp 9, I use the major third again, G sharp. And right at this point, I use a technique that Gary used a lot, which are fast pull-offs to the open string. So that's based on Phrygian dominant, which is the same thing as the fifth mode of A harmonic minor, and we're in the key of A minor. So one more time, B minor 7 flat 5, over E, pull-offs, back to A, and I tried to accentuate chord tones again. Root note, fifth, minor third. Little surrounding note figure. Get us back to the target note, the root note. And I ended with this little hammer pull between the index and pinky, slide back up. And you'll see Gary do that as well. Sometimes, just as much as he's going to go index middle on the higher strings, he'll go index pinky on the lower strings. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this look at the great guitar playing of Gary Moore. It is a tragedy to have lost him at such a young age. So I encourage everyone to listen to his recordings. He really had a lifetime of great recordings that you can refer to, going back to his teenage years with Skid Row and Coliseum, all the way through the 70s with Thin Lizzy, the 80s with his metal albums like The Incredible Corridors of Power, and going up to his great tribute to the blues records like Still Got the Blues and Back to the Blues. I'm Andy Aledort. See you next time.